The Old West wasn't just shootouts and horseback chases. It was a time when a doctor made boots out of a criminal's skin, and outlaws would leave poems in the safes they robbed. Real stories Hollywood never really told right. Stick with us for the 25 strangest ones you've never heard of. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us which fact surprised you the most. Number 1. In 1881, a mob lynched George Big Nose Parrott, an outlaw who terrorized Wyoming. But what happened next is straight-up nightmare fuel. John Osborne, a local doctor, asked for the body for scientific studies. In reality, he turned the criminal's skin into a pair of boots. And here's the part that sounds made up. Osborne wore those same boots on the day he was sworn in as governor of Wyoming. That's right, the governor wearing shoes made out of a person. Parrott's skull was used as an ashtray and a doorstop for decades. The state's first female doctor kept pencils inside it. Osborne and another doctor also opened up the outlaw's brain, trying to find out if criminals had something different in their heads. Those boots still exist to this day and are on display in a museum. Sometimes real history is weirder than any Western movie. Number 2. Have you ever heard of the guy who killed a man just because he snored too loud? Yeah, that really happened. John Wesley Hardin was one of the most feared gunmen in Texas. In court, he himself admitted to taking the lives of 41 people. The guy started killing as a teenager and never stopped. In 1877, after a night fueled by whiskey and cards in Abilene, Kansas, Hardin went to sleep in a cheap hotel. The problem was that the rancher in the room next door, Charles Huger, snored like a freight train. Hardin yelled for him to be quiet. Nothing. So he simply pulled his revolver and fired several times through the thin wall. Huger died in his sleep, without even knowing what happened. Hardin spent more than 20 years behind bars. When he got out, he tried to become a lawyer in Texas. But in 1895, in an El Paso saloon, he was shot in the back. The shooter? A former sheriff named John Selman. Number 3. Have you ever heard of a place so wild it earned the nickname Babylon on the Brazos? Well, Fort Griffin in Texas was exactly that. In the late 1870s, this small military post turned into a magnet for every kind of person you can imagine. Cowboys driving cattle, buffalo hunters selling hides, pro-gamblers betting fortunes at poker tables, and fugitives looking to disappear into the crowd. What's interesting is that names that later went down in history passed through there. John Wesley Hardin, considered one of the most dangerous gunmen of the time, hung around those dusty streets. Doc Holliday, before he got famous in Tombstone, also spent time around there with his partner, Kate. Fort Griffin was the kind of place where the law could barely keep order. Number 4. This guy here is Charles Bowles, but everyone knew him as Black Bart. And look, he wasn't just some regular Old West outlaw. The guy robbed Wells Fargo 28 times in a row without firing a single shot. That's right, not one bullet. He'd show up with an unloaded shotgun, take what he wanted, and walk off because he didn't know how to ride a horse. Now, here's the crazy part. After each robbery, he left poems inside the empty safes. Wells Fargo detectives spent 8 years trying to catch this guy. You know what finally brought him down? A handkerchief that fell during a getaway. The laundry had a mark that led straight to him. Black Bart served 4 years in prison and then just disappeared. Nobody knows for sure what happened to the outlaw poet. Number 5. Did you know Old West whiskey was so strong that sellers would toss it into the flames to prove how powerful it was? It would catch fire instantly, and that's how it got the nickname fire water among indigenous peoples. But here's the part nobody talks about. That drink had nothing to do with the bourbon we know today. Makers would mix burnt sugar, chewing tobacco, and practically pure alcohol to make that stuff. Cowboys and gunmen drank it in saloons after weeks on the trail, and one shot was enough to knock anyone flat. Doctors back then even prescribed it as medicine, believe it or not. The crazy thing is, a lot of men in the West would rather risk a duel than face a hangover from that whiskey. So when you watch those Western movies with bar scenes, remember, what those guys were drinking was basically fuel disguised as booze. Number 6. In 1911, an outlaw named Elmer McCurdy was shot dead by police in Oklahoma after a train robbery. Nobody showed up to claim the body, so the funeral homeowner had an idea that sounds absurd today. He embalmed the guy, dressed him like an Old West bandit, and started charging admission for anyone who wanted to take a look. A penny per person. Things got even weirder. 2 guys showed up claiming to be relatives and took the body away. Lie. Elmer ended up as a traveling carnival attraction, passed around from hand to hand for decades. The most bizarre part happened in 1976. A TV crew was filming at the Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach, California. A technician moved what he thought was a wax dummy in the haunted ride. The arm broke, and real bone showed up inside. It was Elmer, 65 years after his death, still without rest. Number 7. Everyone knows Jesse James, but here's something few people know. His older brother, Frank, may have been the real brains behind it all. The two ran the James Younger gang for years, spreading terror across Missouri with bank and train robberies that left a trail of blood. When Jesse was shot in the back in 1882, Frank made a decision nobody expected. He simply showed up at the Missouri governor's office and turned himself in. The words he said that day went down in history. "I have literally lived in the saddle. I have never known a day of perfect peace." The most surprising part? Frank went on trial and walked free. He spent the next 30 years living an ordinary life, working simple jobs, until he died of natural causes in 1915. The most wanted outlaw in the country ended his days as just another regular citizen. Number 8. This guy lived a double life that would make any Hollywood movie look way too simple. James Miller went to church every Sunday, helped the pastor, and never touched a drop of booze. But he had a little secret. He was a hired gun. Official records talk about 14 kills, but historians believe that number may have been closer to 50. And here's the part that'll really make you think. A lot of people believe he's the one who killed Pat Garrett, the same guy who took down Billy the Kid. How did he survive so long in that line of work? He wore a metal plate hidden under his clothes. He took 4 shots to the chest on different occasions and stayed on his feet. It caught up with him in 1909 when a mob decided justice was taking too long. They hanged Miller in a barn in Texas. They say his last words were asking them not to mess up his new suit. Number 9. New Mexico, 1870. A traveler stops at an isolated cabin between Elizabethtown and Taos. The owner was Charles Kennedy, a big guy with a thick beard, living there with his Ute wife named Rose and their little 5-year-old son. It looked like a normal rest stop, but that kid knew things nobody could have imagined. The boy looked at the stranger and dropped a warning that would chill anyone. His dad killed people, and he was next. The traveler didn't have time to run. Kennedy shot him dead. And the son who spoke up? His own father shut him up for good. That cabin worked like a death trap. Whoever went in didn't come out. Kennedy robbed travelers of everything and got rid of the bodies. No one knows how many victims passed through there, but when the truth came out, the Old West proved it had real-life monsters. Number 10, Kansas, 1870s. A German family opens a small inn on a busy road. Travelers would stop there to eat, rest, and keep moving, but a lot of them never made it to their destination. Here's the creepy detail. The house had a weird layout. A curtain split the main room, and guests always sat with their backs to it. On the other side, someone waited with a hammer. When neighbors finally went on to the abandoned property, they found 11 bodies buried in the orchard, all with smashed skulls and slit throats. The Benders just vanished. To this day, nobody knows for sure what happened to them. Some say they were lynched by vigilantes. Others swear they escaped to Mexico. A woman was arrested decades later claiming to be Kate Bender, but it was never confirmed. The case sparked investigations for more than 50 years. The truth? It probably died with that family. Number 11. Seasoned Old West gunmen had a golden rule: never sit with your back to the door. It sounds silly, but that simple precaution saved a lot of lives in those violent days. Wild Bill Hickok knew that rule well. In August 1876, he was playing poker at the Nuttall and Mann saloon in Deadwood, but that day his usual seat was taken. He asked to switch twice, but the other player refused. Bill sat with his back to the door. It was a fatal mistake. Jack McCall, a guy who had lost badly to Bill the day before, quietly came in through the back of the saloon. He walked up behind him and fired point blank. The cards Bill was holding when he went down became legend: 2 aces and 2 eights. To this day, that combo is called the dead man's hand at American poker tables. Number 12. Have you ever heard of the woman who set an entire building on fire to get her man out of jail? Yep, that's Kate Harney, known in the Old West as Big Nose Kate. She wasn't just any saloon girl. She came from a wealthy Hungarian family, but her life took a hard turn when she was orphaned as a child. She ended up in Texas, working in dance halls and brothels. And that's exactly where she met Doc Holliday, the same guy who later fought alongside Wyatt Earp in the most famous shootout in American history. The two had a rocky relationship for years, but the moment that really shows who Kate was happened when Holliday got arrested. Without thinking twice, she set a nearby shed on fire. While everyone ran to put out the flames, she simply went in and got Doc out of there. A move few men would have had the guts to pull off. Number 13. You've probably seen cowboys wearing bandanas in old movies and thought it was just for style. But the real story is way more interesting. In the Old West, that piece of cloth was just as important as the gun in your holster. Cowboys spent hours breathing in dust kicked up by hundreds of cattle. Without a bandana covering their face, their lungs couldn't take it. The sun beat down on their necks all day, so the bandana became protection against burns. At night, when the temperature dropped fast, it kept their ears warm. Need to grab a pot off the fire? The bandana did the job. But here's the part people don't talk about much. That same practical item turned into a tool for crime. Just pull it up and you've got a perfect mask to rob a bank or a stagecoach. The same thing that saved lives also hid the identities of outlaws. Number 14. Did you know one of the most feared figures at Old West poker tables was a woman? Alice Ivers arrived in the United States in 1865, still a child, brought from England by her family. Years later, in Colorado, she discovered something that would change her life: cards. What's interesting is where it all started. Alice learned to play in a saloon owned by Bob Ford, the man who shot Jesse James in the back. Coincidence or not, she had nerves of steel, too. At the tables, Alice developed her own style. She mixed technical skill with a sharp read on her opponents. The result? In a single night, she pocketed $6,000, an amount few men back then could earn in years of work. But in 1910, her luck turned. Alice killed a soldier inside her own place. The case landed her behind bars, ending a career that proved talent doesn't pick a gender. Number 15. Do you know the story of Pearl Hart? She saw Buffalo Bill perform in Canada, and it got into her head in a way that changed everything. At 17, she left her family and ended up in Arizona. There, she met Joe Wood, and the two of them started causing trouble. In 1899, they decided to rob a stagecoach, one of those that carried money and passengers across the desert. The plan worked, but then came the problem. They got lost in the middle of nowhere and ended up getting caught. Pearl made headlines all over the country. You know why? She was only the second woman to pull off that kind of robbery, but the first one who didn't die trying. And here's the interesting part. She was convicted, but prisons back then weren't set up for women. So what happened? They let her go after 18 months. The system just didn't know what to do with an outlaw like Pearl. Number 16. Did you know that before the internet, there was a service that made it feel like letters were flying across the country? The Pony Express covered more than 3,000 kilometers in just 10 days, something unthinkable at the time. The setup was simple but brutal. Young riders, many of them teenagers, swapped horses every 12 miles at stations along the route. They slept little, ate even less, and faced hostile tribes and outlaws. Here's the detail most people don't know. The service lasted only 18 months, from 1860 to 1861. The owners lost what would be the equivalent of millions of dollars today. What killed the Pony Express wasn't a lack of courage from the riders, but something nobody saw coming: the telegraph. Once the wires connected the country coast to coast, sending instant messages became possible, and those brave young riders became history overnight. Number 17. Did you know the U.S. Army once tried using camels in the Texas desert? In 1856, the government brought 66 of these animals from the Middle East to Camp Verde. The logic made sense. If it worked for militaries in Asia and Africa, why not here? And honestly, at first it worked. They could handle the heat, needed very little water, and carried loads no horse could manage. The problem? Nobody warned the soldiers that camels have a rough personality. They spit, they bite, and they scared the troop horses. The men just couldn't work with them. When the Civil War broke out, the project was forgotten. After the conflict, the camels were sold to circuses or just turned loose in the desert. For decades, travelers swore they'd seen wild camels roaming the American Southwest. Number 18. You probably grew up hearing that scalping was an Indian thing, right? Well, the history is a lot more complicated than that. The Apaches really did practice it as proof of victory in battle, but here's the detail most people don't hear. Colonial governments paid bounties for native scalps. That's right, there was an official market for it. During the Civil War, a guy named William Anderson, nicknamed Bloody Bill, took that brutality to another level. He and his Confederate guerrillas collected Union soldiers' scalps and hung them from their horses' saddles. Anderson was killed in 1864 at age 24, but his reputation for cruelty lived on. What started as an indigenous ritual became a tool of terror used by all sides in the American conflict. Number 19. Have you ever heard of St. Elmo's fire? Sailors knew that stuff well. During storms, a bluish light would appear at the top of the masts. Guys took it as a sign of good luck, but in the Old West, the story was very different. Picture yourself herding cattle at night when a storm is rolling in. Suddenly, the cattle's horns start glowing with a ghostly light. Sometimes even the horse's ears would light up too. The phenomenon happens when the electricity in the air gets highly charged. Science explains it all nowadays. But back then, cowboys didn't know that. To them, it was something from another world. They say tough men, who faced outlaws and Indians without blinking, would take off running when they saw all that glowing cattle in the darkness of the prairie. Number 20. Hollywood sold an image of the Old West that doesn't tell the whole story. Most people have no idea that about 1 in 4 cowboys was black. These men drove cattle for hundreds of miles, broke wild horses, and knew the work as well as anyone. When the Civil War broke out, a lot of ranch owners in Texas marched off to the battlefield. Who stayed behind running everything? Enslaved people who'd already been doing the hard work for years. They kept entire operations going on their own during the conflict. After the war, with freedom won, these men had to make a living. The job they already knew became the natural path. Some became legends in rodeos. Others drove thousands of head of cattle along the country's best-known trails. But when movies decided to tell these stories, they basically erased those people from the screen. Number 21. Have you ever stopped to think about how bounty hunters proved they'd caught the outlaw? In the Old West, the guy had to drag the body for days under the blazing sun until he made it to town. Just imagine what that looked like after a week on the back of a horse. When the camera made it out west, it changed everything. Bounty hunters found a shortcut. Just take a photo of the dead outlaw. But there was a creepy detail. For the picture to come out right and the ID to be accepted, they'd often prop the corpse up standing against a wall, like he was still alive. The photographer had to work fast before the body collapsed. This record here shows that exact moment. A man who probably had a bounty on his head set up for his last pose. That's how deals got closed back then. Number 22. Did you know most Old West saloons didn't even have real walls? They were canvas tents where cowboys walked in armed to the teeth. The Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City became a legend, but here's a detail most people don't know. The original building burned down in 1885, and everything you see today is a reconstruction. In places like that, a poker game could end in a shootout over a marked card. Bartenders often kept rifles under the counter, ready for any trouble. Unlike what Hollywood showed, there wasn't a piano playing classy music. It was noise, dust, and cheap whiskey that tasted more like kerosene. Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson used to hang out at that saloon before they became famous names. The truth is, surviving one night in those bars was an adventure all by itself. Number 23. You're looking at a man who defeated General Custer. Sitting Bull led the Lakota resistance at a time when the U.S. government wanted everything his people had. At the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, his strategies helped wipe out the entire 7th Cavalry, one of the worst military disasters in American history. But here's what a lot of people don't know. Years after that victory, he ended up working in Buffalo Bill's show. Just imagine it. The warrior who humiliated the U.S. Army now performing for crowds who paid for tickets. He made $50 a week, a lot of money back then. But something didn't feel right. After 4 months, he quit and went back to the Standing Rock Reservation. They say he gave most of his paycheck to poor kids he saw on the streets. Number 24. Did you know that in Gold Rush, California, there were 9 men for every woman? That's right, 9 to 1. In the 1850s, thousands of men showed up every day looking for fortune, but there were hardly any women. So saloon owners came up with a smart idea. They started hiring women to work in their places. Their job was simple: sing, dance, and talk with the customers. The longer the men stayed there chatting, the more whiskey they ordered, and the more money went into the register. Now here's the detail most people don't know. Most of those women weren't what you're thinking. They were entertainment professionals. Many made better wages than teachers back then, and men treated them with a level of respect that would surprise a lot of people today. Number 25, Geronimo. That name scared soldiers on both sides of the border for more than 25 years. What most people don't know is that he wasn't born a leader. He became a warrior after Mexican troops massacred his mother, wife, and 3 children in 1851. From that day on, he never stopped fighting. With only 30 warriors, he gave thousands of American and Mexican soldiers a hard time. The army sent 5,000 men just to capture him. When he surrendered for the last time in 1886, he was the last native leader still at war against the United States. The ending is what really hits. After years as a prisoner, Geronimo ended up becoming a kind of celebrity. He showed up at President Theodore Roosevelt's inauguration and made money selling autographed photos at fairs. If you're into these real Old West stories, drop a comment telling us which fact surprised you the most.